Okay, this lecture is about political parties. First of all, let's go ahead and distinguish between political parties and special interest groups. Both are involved in U.S. politics, and both can be described as linking institutions. A political party is an organization or a group of people who seek to influence public policy by getting their members elected to public office. One more time. Organization of people who seek to influence public policy by getting their members elected to public office. So political parties are going to be election-centered. Special interest groups are organizations of people who seek to influence public policy. Notice they do not run candidates for public office. So that's going to be the key distinction between political parties and special interest groups, is that political parties are all election-focused. Special interest groups are not necessarily election-focused, and special interest groups absolutely do not run candidates for office. Functions of political parties in the United States. Okay, one thing that political parties do in the United States, and for that matter, one thing that political parties do in most other democracies, is that they clarify and they limit choices. While limiting a choice may not seem like a good idea, in reality it is. What is the ability of the average voter to distinguish among, let's say, 15 or 20 candidates that might desire a given public office? But through the electoral process that we have, and with the requirement that political parties can only nominate one person in most instances for public office, that enhances the ability of the citizen to intelligently discern between two choices in the United States. So it's easier, simply put, it's easier to know more about two main candidates as opposed to knowing about 10. Political parties also serve to recruit candidates for public office. Political parties provide voter queues. That's the little D or the R by a candidate's name. This can be an important thing in U.S. politics or in any other political system where they have what is called the long ballot. For example, at the national level, we expect citizens to be able to discern between two different candidates for president. They usually can do that. Two different candidates for U.S. Senator. Sometimes they can do that. Two different candidates for U.S. House. Maybe they can do that. But at the state level, in most states, they have a whole host of elected positions. For example, in the state of Oklahoma, citizens will vote on governor, lieutenant governor, which those are elected separately, insurance commissioner, labor commissioner, corporation commissioner, superintendent of public instruction, state attorney general, superintendent of public instruction, and auditor and inspector. And then they will vote for their state senator, state representative. For county officers, they will elect a clerk, a court clerk, a county commissioner, a county treasurer, a county assessor, and a county sheriff. We will also ask these same voters to intelligently discern between multiple candidates for various judgeships at the district court level, retention ballot for state Supreme Court, state Court of Appeals, and so on. So, what is the ability of the average voter to intelligently discern among, or to know anything about that entire list of candidates? It's really asking a lot of voters. However, the fact that those on the general election ballot, candidates will wear a D or an R by their name tells voters a lot. So if you don't know anything about the candidate, the fact that they have a D or an R by their name tells you something. And for many voters, particularly for what we call down ballot races, those races toward the bottom of the ballot, those lower level offices, that actually is going to dictate voter behavior. They will make their choice based primarily on that voter queue. Political parties will also provide information to voters. Political parties will attempt to disseminate information, albeit biased, to citizens to inform them about candidates for various public office. One way that political parties in particular attempt to educate citizens is to provide them information on what their party stands for. This is typically done through what is called a party platform. Now, at the national level, party platforms tend to be generic because you don't want a platform that will offend large segments of society, and you want a platform that will appeal to as many people as possible. Still yet, this does provide the voters some information about what the party, and to a lesser extent, what the individual candidates stand for that affiliate with that party. Political parties also serve as a means for voter mobilization. This is a way to get individuals active in politics, to get them excited about politics, and to get them to vote. Political parties go to great lengths to make sure that voters have access to polling locations. They arrange rides for individuals to get to polling locations if they have transportation issues and so on, because for a political party to win, they have to ensure that their members, their voters, make it to the polls. So political parties provide a somewhat useful function of mobilizing voters. Political parties also provide campaign support for candidates. Now, we're going to talk in a minute about candidate-centered campaigns, or that might actually be in the election chapter. But still yet, even in candidate-centered campaigns, political parties do provide some support for candidates. This oftentimes comes in the form of training. Political parties will provide campaign manager schools. Political parties will provide, at the national level, they'll have television studios so that candidates could record advertisements and so forth, as opposed to having to bear all the cost of that. Political parties sometimes will do voter polls to provide candidates information, and these are ways that they can provide services to candidates which decrease the cost that an individual candidate has to bear. One thing in particular they will do is fundraising, although the amount of funding that a campaign will give to a candidate is rather limited. Typically what you see is that political party funding for a candidate usually doesn't cover more than about 10% of the cost of the actual campaign. That being said, special interest groups will usually be far more important in terms of funding for a candidate. And as previously mentioned, they'll provide training for campaign staff and the candidate, and also provide media support services. And do opposition research, and I think we mentioned also data management, polling, and so forth. Okay, who are the Republicans? Key constituencies for the Republican Party includes the following. Individuals who are ideologically conservative. These would be individuals who have a belief system that revolves around conservatism. And as previously mentioned in the public opinion lecture, we have to distinguish between fiscal conservatives and social conservatives. People that are fiscally conservative and or socially conservative typically will find a home in the Republican Party, and it is incorrect to assert that all Republicans are conservative on both of these issues. That is simply not true. People that are ideologically libertarian will find a home in the Republican Party, so the Republican Party has at least two major ideologies that are inside of it. Persons that are affiliated with business, and this can be small business or big business, and that's their orientation, their main concern for governmental policy. They'll usually find a home in the Republican Party. And often what is called the religious right. Individuals who believe that their religious values should be translated into public policy, they are usually in the Republican Party. Key constituencies of the Democratic Party include people that are ideologically liberal. And again, we have to draw a distinction between both fiscal and social issues. Organized labor is typically associated with the Democratic Party. People that are government workers are disproportionately aligned with the Democratic Party. And finally, most racial minorities. In particular, we would see African Americans having the strongest affinity for the Democratic Party, with about 80% of African Americans voting Democratic. A strong second place in that area would be Hispanics, although we would have to distinguish between groups such as Mexican Americans and Cuban Americans. Cuban Americans, interestingly enough, are Republican, primarily coming from Cuba. The Republican Party's strong stance against Castro and Cuban and communism. But most other Hispanics tend to be affiliated with the Democratic Party. There are various components to political parties in the United States. The first is going to be the formal party organization, or something simply called the party organization. These would be the individuals who hold party office, not governmental office, but party office. And by this I mean party chairman, party co-chair, national committee man, national committee woman, and so forth. These are going to be this would be the individuals we call the formal party organization. You could perhaps also throw into this the activists, the people that show up at all the events, because there's a truism in American politics that both parties will subscribe to called get them entitled, get them involved. If you show up at several party functions, you'll probably end up being committee chairman in charge of something. And the idea is that if you give someone a position in a party, they're far more likely to be active in the party than they would otherwise. Then we have the party in government. These are the individuals who hold governmental office, who happen to be affiliated with the political party. And then finally, we have the party in the electorate. And this would be the average voter who affiliates with the party in a closed primary state by declaring their affiliation at the time of registration, or in an open party state by voting in that party's primary. So the largest group of a political party tends to be the party in the electorate. Interestingly enough, it is also the least partisan. The most partisan of the three groups would be the party organization. This way of looking at it, this classification system, is important whenever we think about who does the nomination, the selecting of candidates. In most other democracies, candidates are selected by the party organization or the party in government, or a combination between the two. These tend to be the people that are most oriented toward the success of the party. Whereas in the United States, because of the direct primary, the party in the electorate, the group that is least concerned about the party, is the one that actually selects candidates. Organizational structures inside of parties. Okay, at the top of the top of the organizational structure of a party that actually does work is going to be the National Committee. The National Committee of both parties is comprised of both the National Committee man and the National Committee woman from each state, plus various other officials as per the party constitution. This organization will meet several times a year, and its primary function is to plan the National Convention, and select a party chair whenever necessary. And then what they predominantly end up doing is approving decisions that the party chairman has made. The party chairman is going to be the person who runs the party day to day, and he's going to come up with a plan of action and agenda, and that agenda is usually approved by the National Committee and given official sanction. Then there are various campaign committees. There's a campaign committee in both parties for the House. Both parties have a Senate campaign committee, and both parties have state legislative committees. These campaign committees provide support services for individuals running for Congress or for state legislature, and they will also engage in fundraising. At the state level, the highest entity is usually called the State Central Committee, and it's comprised of various people from across the state, party officers, party officials, and so on. Then there are various county committees, local committees that are usually referred to as ward committees, precinct committees, and so on. These are typically not well attended. As a general rule, if you will show up at a local party meeting, such as a precinct meeting, you can probably become chairman of that precinct, because many of these precinct meetings no one will attend. And even though it's at the bottom of the list, the actual most important thing is the National Convention, and it really is the supreme embodiment of the party. It is superior to the National Committee, although it will only meet for about 1 week once every 4 years. So in terms of operating the party, it's not that important, but in theory, it is the most important, highest structure of the political party.